Hey, good morning, guys. So this is another video in our kind of new series, I guess. So if you don't know what we're trying to do and what we're thinking of doing, we initially started a prop firm channel within our Discord, automate these strategies, but with a slightly different twist, right? Now, when I say a slightly different twist, there's a couple of things, and I showed an example of this morning to our members in Discord. The issue that I have with a lot of these mechanical type strategies, right, is that it's nothing's idiot proof, right? Nothing is foolproof. Nothing is 100% guaranteed. There's definitely no silver bullet when it comes to automation. There's no silver bullet in terms of the perfect strategy that's going to give you, an absolute hit rate, 100%, and kind of you winning every trade, right? So, with that being said, what I want to do is I want to share with you guys this particular trade that I was showing this morning, right? So, this was actually playing out live, and I was posting in the channel showing this kind of, what to expect, why to expect. So, what I want to do is obviously kind of I've given this to the members because that's what they're ultimately there for. But in the grand scheme of things, I want to share these things as close to as they happen as I can. And the reason for this is that by building up a series here on Tradingview, we want to get people's feedbacks and comments on what strategies they've seen, what they'd like to look at, if there's anything that they think that could be automated, and the whole point is to kind of just start a discussion, right? So what I'm going to do to begin with, I'm going to go through this particular setup, right? And I'm going to show this, kind of backwards and kind of come into the current time, right? In terms of why these positions and so on. So if you haven't seen, obviously, part of our series, right, what I wanted to do first of all is to go to, where was it to? We got the live stream catch up, right? So there's these two videos here, right? Which both of them are. I'm not sure if this one's on Tradingview yet, right? This one's definitely on Tradingview. This is my last stream. So we come into my profile, you'll see that one. This was myself and Paul talking about the strategy that we currently playing with, right? The second one was again just kind of going into why and how we're looking to automate it, right? So these are two videos worth watching. There's actually a third one that I've done. Let me just do this, copy this, I'll put that in there, be there. Well, actually, no, it's just Tradingview. Let me go into, I think it was the community live streams. So if you scroll on down in the community live streams, as I've just found there, I think it was in the education section. Scrolling down into the education section, it was this one here, right? So this one here was how you could take prop firm challenges, right? Starting with, a little as, I think some of them were even $75, right? So in essence, $75 to $100, $150 realistically, and how you can scale up to $1 million, right? So where we're going with this series is to take these challenges on a kind of fully automated system with our professional experience and input into creating the strategy, right? So it's kind of refining someone else's strategy as to why we think, they fail some of the time, what they could do to enhance that, and therefore kind of move it on forward, right? So that being said, we're putting all this together on Tradingview, and it's kind of still a little bit kind of wishy-washy in terms of what we do, and we want the feedback more than anything, right, first. The next thing then, right, is in this particular setup this morning, I talked about a couple of things, right? So I won't click on because that one's a new one. First of all, in the prop firm traders. So this morning, I basically explained that there was a trade about to set up. This was obviously the 20th November, 9:38 my time. That's obviously 10:55 this morning, the same day. So an hour and a half ago-ish, right? Now, the general idea was I was expecting the price to come back down to this zone. Right? Now, you can see what I've put ideal zone for the Asian session. In this particular area, what I'm talking about is I like this trade as a 3-to-1 risk to reward. It's not conventional in terms of the strategy that we've been showing and talking about. And the real move is post the Asian sweep, right? But what I was looking at is the CVD indicator, right, which is the cumulative volume delta, and our stochastic, right? And then I think because the sweep looked like it was likely to move on up based on these factors, right, I was looking for the price to rise or rally, right? Now, this is a minute time frame, right? So obviously I've assessed a bigger time frame. I've looked at what the stochastics say, and I've looked at what CVD is trying to tell us. And you could see that the sweep is very probable that up it was ready to go, right? So looking at this particular level, right, I've highlighted with the arrow, this was obviously now 40, this is 2 minutes later. And what I'm looking at, right, is I want to ping to this level, to enter just below this level, or on a 1 minute time frame, right? I think this was a 1 minute. What was the first one? I think it was a 5 minute, maybe 3 minutes, right? So a 3 minute and a 1 minute. So the general idea was that I was actually looking for ideas as to what the character was saying. If the 1 minute time frame was saying no, then I won't enter, right? Now for the 3 and the 5 minute, right, we were waiting for the stochastics to line up. And then I had a little bit of a joke in terms of Paul. Paul was actually looking at a 15-second chart the other day, right? And I just couldn't get myself to do that, right? 15 seconds was a bit nuts even for Paul. So the point is then playing around with all these different things, right? Looking at where looking at where the moves were, looking at where the gaps were, looking at what the stochastics were saying. The general idea was that we could see why the character is key and why you wouldn't just take a trade like this, right? Now, obviously, some of these mechanical systems, they will literally just take the trade based on an entry level, right? This was more about the character assessment, even on a small time frame, right? So what I was saying is that ideally, we want the 5 minutes should close in the oversold territory. So this is the 5 minutes. We were looking for that oversold on the stochastic. CVD was pointing down, right? Now, obviously, at this particular point, we could drag the entry down, right? Because what we were seeing was the character assessment, which basically meant we were lowering the risk and increasing the percentage of the TP, right? So at this particular point, we were now looking at a 4.6% return, and this was actually taken on a live account, right? So at this particular point, we could zoom out. We could see why the ideal zone into the Asian session. We could see on a 30-minute time frame that the stochastic was now pointing up. CVD had just crossed back into the green zone, right? All of the character on the smaller time frame was basically saying we're ready to go. So I highlighted the fact that why I kept saying, ideally, we just want a little dance and off she goes. I keep saying ideally, right? Because obviously it can't be 100% sure on something like this. This is a 1 minute time frame, right? So it's the character that you're assessing and not the level, right? So as ultimately we start, these percentages give us a 4.6% to the upside. And then what I did was I dragged from the high to the low, right, in terms of the percentages overall, right? So the point then was having the overall risk, we could measure out roughly the kinds of levels, 30%, right? And obviously this was 3.8, 50% and 75%. So I marked these up on the chart, right, as it was obviously flowing through. Now, as the price ultimately started to move on up, right, and the price started to increase, what we could see, let me come back to the chart because this will be easier to show now. As the price started to rally, first target, the 30% was hit. Now, what I was explaining to the students here was if you were trying to pass a challenge and you were in the early stages with still demo money on these prop firm challenges, locking in 30% of a 4.6% move, right, was ultimately a good position if you want. It was 10 o'clock or 9:40, whatever it was, on a Monday morning, right? Now, obviously, the price rallies on up. we're at the 50% level. If I drop down to a 1 minute time frame, as the price pulls back here, there is nothing stopping you moving the stop loss to break even, which is why this has been dragged up altogether. At this particular point, you could even decide to take 50% of your trade, which was obviously then 2% plus at the time. The general idea was, if you were, again, trying to pass these challenges, you might have been early in it, you might have been late in it, and 1-2% is quite a big chunk in one go within a couple of minutes, right? Now, at this particular point, as the price kind of said rallied, what I was trying to explain, step by step, stage by stage, was putting obviously these alerts on, right? Is what I did. So when the 50% was hit, you could easily take 2.3% off the trade. And that means you could take 1% if you were to half it. 1.15 if you wanted to do that. You're locking in a gain of 1% plus as a worst case scenario. And then ultimately, you're taking your risk back to zero, because in essence, you now have a free trade. You've locked in your profit. You've got a break-even stop loss, and you're only now waiting for the price to carry on through. If the price pulls back completely against you, you've still locked in that 1 point something percent, right? So these are just me saying, look, guys, here's some ideas for you to think about in terms of managing the trade, right? It doesn't have to be an all-out, we've lost or we've won. This can be how you can look at this type of scenario, smaller time frame, right? So as the price then rallied on up to the next level, this was the 75%, right? Now, what I'd done was I put, obviously you can see these little alarm clocks on Tradingview, right? These little alarm clocks were giving me an alert, right? I've actually put a bot into the musing channel, and I actually get these little alerts when I set my alert to whatever I decide to set it to. So the first one was the euro hit obviously the 2.3% 1 minute time frame, SL to break even, right? That was obviously 10 past 7. 7 minutes past 10. 16 minutes past 10, we were talking about the 3.5% being reached, right? Now, at this particular stage, I was getting quite itchy in terms of wanting a cup of tea, and therefore I decided to assess the character and go a little bit deeper in terms of what was actually happening, there and then, right? So I talked about this as the next stage. I was explaining that I'm really fancying a cup of tea. I'm going to be closing out for the day. It's 3.5% on the live account, 10 o'clock Monday morning. I really can't complain with a trade and a move laid out like this, right? The next thing ultimately is looking at obviously the extension level. Now, the general idea is that obviously I was expecting some kind of pullback. I just closed out then at the 3.71 as obviously price continued to rally. Now, part of me feels I could have stayed in. It's always a kind of hypothetical. We might not have had, a pullback. The pullback could have been 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. I was quite happy, going to stick the kettle on. So the whole point of all of this, right, is I'm trying to show you guys how putting some human emotion into this, right, putting that kind of empathy into, what I see as automated systems is really invaluable, right? Understanding why we were likely to sweep the Asian session to the upside, why we're waiting for obviously these little wiggles that I call them, right, these little dances. The point is we could easily be moving on up and we could just carry on up, right? This was the little wiggle that I talked about, right? There's the wiggle. So I was chatting through, this is obviously to myself really, but this is to show you guys, what you're looking for, why in a real time frame, real live environment, and to show you what I'm seeing, kind of why I'm thinking what I'm thinking when I see these kinds of moves, right? So anyway, the longs and shorts of it, right, is I marked up the 30, the 50, and the 75. This isn't something that you need to do, right? This is obviously part of that blueprint trade, which is obviously this one. Part of the blueprint that I shared midway through this was showing how you can, step up profits. You only need your 2%, your 4% in a month, right? I've just done 3.7% this morning, right? That's, a Monday morning. The reality is, guys, these things don't have to be overly complicated, right? And you don't have to go looking for 1000x returns. You don't have to go looking for 100% a day or an all or nothing type of trade, right? This can be managed slowly, right? Manage something that you can manage yourself sustainably, right? And something that doesn't need to take up all your time, right? So as the price basically kind of rallies, we go up, and obviously we had a pullback, right? It was only what, 6 minutes ish, right, worth of a pullback. Then we carry on through. This particular target was then tagged. This was obviously the 4.6%, and I put that. I'd obviously would have done the 4.6 if I'd stayed in the trade, right? And as you can see, I'm not hiding any fact there. I got out of the trade a little bit earlier on, thinking that I was going to see a pullback. I was quite happy with my 3.7%, right? And therefore, what we were seeing is on a 15-minute time frame, 30-minute time frame, everything was still kind of pointing up, right? The stochastics were obviously still showing up we wanted to go. There was a little bit of wiggle room left in there. What was this? Was on a 1-minute time frame. We were nearing obviously that high at this particular point. And then obviously I come in to explain why I picked this zone, right? This was obviously euro dollar. It tends to work in increments, right? Now, obviously being probably the biggest instrument for newer traders. If you ever join an exchange or a platform or some kind of forex broker, these guys tend to have the smallest spreads, right, on the euro dollar, which is then an attractive kind of symbol for many newer traders. There's also an element of the charts. If you open up MT4, MT5, 9 times out of 10, it kind of comes preloaded with euro dollar, right? So there's a lot of play around euro dollar, which drives it back to retail. Now, retail obviously are newer players, newer traders, and therefore they assume 5 pip stop loss or a 10 pip stop loss, a 15 pip stop loss, a 20 pip. So all these kind of round numbers, right? Now, a lot of other markets like Aussie dollar, you might find a 7 or a 13 or a 16 pip move. In euro, you do tend to find, especially on these smaller time frames, the moves are often 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, for example, right? So the Asian sweep was obviously what I was aiming for, right? I was seeing why we were likely to move on up rather than down. So I basically had a target just above or near the red area, and that's good enough for me. Obviously, I'm currently drinking my cup of tea. And where we are at the moment, we come on up, we're close enough. I mean, let's just see how far we are away from that little red line there. We are 0.00008 or 0.01% from my Asian level that I was identifying down back here, right? So in that particular sense, seeing it all live, playing it all live, talking about it, kind of the emotions, the options, the reason for kind of getting in or getting out, the wiggle room, the what you were looking for, kind of why. That's all part of what this series is going to be about, right? Now, obviously, for the next video, what we're aiming to do is to take these shorter time frame, kind of plays, and to turn this into a bit more of an automated type of strategy, right? So obviously stay tuned for other videos in the series. If you haven't subscribed, obviously, to us, at all in terms of YouTube or here on Tradingview, then you can get obviously your notifications based on, on that. And therefore, just keep watching for what we kind of bring in next. All right. So I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions on Tradingview, and then I'm going to go and finish my cup of tea altogether. Okay, so nothing there at the moment. Let me just scroll down. We got no questions, so I'm going to leave it like that. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next stream. Thank you all. Cheers.